We're in the midst of a huge transformation where peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest on to interview series, Krista Pappas. She is the VP of Global Human Resources at GAN. Krista, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Great. Yes, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Krista Pappas. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I remember answering that question very specifically and dramatically because it was movie star / marine biologist.
Wow. I love that. A lot of creativity.
Well, I ended up being a marine biology major in college for a while until I switched to business. So I got a chance to dip into that a little bit.
I love it. And you fast forward to today. How has your personal journey since then really led you to lead HR at GAN?
So I've been in human resources. I was fortunate enough to start a career in HR right out of college and started in recruiting. I've moved my way throughout HR over the years and worked in a couple of different industries and in many countries. I found the opportunity with GAN a little over a year ago. We've been in high growth mode, transition, and acquisition mode. So it's been a pretty exciting and eventful year for me.
Yes, a lot of growth that is really exciting and also really relates to kind of the title of this show as well. When you have more people joining, how you're thinking about that really global company culture too. When you're thinking about measuring company culture, what are qualitative and quantitative ways you think about, especially when you are across the map?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that we like to look at is the engagement level of our employees. And we see that in a number of different ways through our internal platforms and communication tools, and to some surveys and polls that we do on a regular basis to check in with people. We've got so many different kinds of people in so many places doing different roles. So it's important to check in with all of those points because each piece is part of the equation for that global picture. So engagement is one thing that we look at. How things are going for the department, how their team meetings are going, what sort of feedback their managers are giving from those meetings. And, my whole HR team participates in those so that we're a regular part of the landscape. So we're able to get some of those pieces of feedback directly from the employees on a regular basis.
Yeah, the role of the employee voice is really important, and offering different opportunities throughout the employee experience to offer that is also really critical to that strategy as well, especially in different time zones and employees who are at day 1, year 5. What pieces would you say of the HR people talent strategy are specifically global, and what really needs to remain local?
Yeah, so I think from a global perspective, you're looking at all of your overarching policies regarding an employee life, things like how we're looking at performance, how it looks to move throughout the organization from country to country, things like the general practices of the organization. But in terms of what is local, obviously there's a lot of legal differences country to country, and there's just a lot of general practices that are very different, and we need to accommodate those. We also try to create transparency to employees in other countries and other locations so they understand what some of the differences are and some of the cultural aspects of life in the other countries for their peers. So there are things that we are kind of obligated, or statutory things that we have to include by country. And then for events and things like that, we lean on practices. They're very different by country. So if there are traditional types of events, say in Europe, that they do for outings or a pub crawl or whatever that might be. We try to have some fun with what people like to do locally. So we leave events, planning, all of the ways that people like to get together and network to that local culture and feel.
Yeah, employee connectivity and creating those meaningful moments is important. Kind of listening to feedback around how they want to spend that time together. And to your point, transparency, really effective communication between the why, if things are different, is also critical too. And you mentioned at the beginning of our interview just the massive amounts of growth that's happening. We know that company culture is not static, it's consistently changing and needs to be cultivated and fostered as well. How are you thinking about really scaling GAN's company culture in that way during this hypergrowth period?
Yeah, so I think the part of it is to have a very solid foundation in communication. What is communication going to look like for us? What are those chains? And, there might be different venues that we use to interact with people globally who are remotely and some are in hybrid situations. So that communication plan is something that we're always touching and looking at and making sure that we're incorporating the constant changes in our industry and socioeconomic issues. There have been, political situations that have impacted our business. So we're always trying to be cognizant of those things. And having that communication plan in place is the best thing that you can do for any initiative that you have. Lay that groundwork first before you start rolling things out. Everyone knows their role. I think the next thing for us is what are the priorities and what issues are arising at that given time so that we can address those as we're scaling and we're moving out the culture. We're doing a lot of work on making sure that everyone understands some of the changes in the organization. They know what their peers are working on, projects that they're working on. So some of the things that we like to do is create opportunities for people to hear about things that are outside of their scope of responsibility. So they have a holistic sense of what we're doing as an organization. They know everyone's piece. And it really creates a lot of satisfaction for people when they can say, oh, wow, I heard about that project from the beginning and now it's getting launched. So it's great to see all of those pieces. So that's another piece of it. But I think it's very important is that things do change so quickly and you have to stay with it. You have to touch it regularly and see where your gaps are. And if something's become obsolete or if something new has happened, that you're able to address it quickly as an organization. And by having that communication plan in place, you're focusing on what you're scaling and what you're pushing out into the organization as opposed to how you're going to communicate it because you have your plan in place every time.
Yeah, you have to be agile, really listen to that feedback, move with people, kind of meet them where they are as well, and have that effective two-way communication in place, especially as things are rapidly changing, opportunities for collaboration and just sharing information, especially in a hybrid setting where a lot of folks are saying, if you're fully remote or fully in person, hybrid is a mix of both. So you really have to be think about those meaningful moments of connection. How are you thinking about those at GAN right now?
So I think it needs to be part of your daily life in an organization. You always have to be thinking about that. And on the individual level, what we try to do is always think about where someone could find a connection. So if I'm speaking to someone and they talk about an aspiration or a project or something that they're thinking about, I will be thinking about someone else in the organization elsewhere that I can connect them with. So that on that level, our team is always focusing on making sure that people who are remote, hybrid, wherever they are in the world, that they have a unique opportunity to connect with somebody face to face that can help them in their journey and helping them start to build their network. So that's the one thing that we always like to be mindful of and practice every day. Who can I connect people with? I love when I find that and it turns into like a mentoring relationship for someone. I have something going on right now like that, and it just makes me happy to know you connect people because you think they would be beneficial to each other, and then 8 months later you see there's a mentoring relationship. You see things happening for the more junior person that the more senior person has clearly had a hand in. So it can play out that way and be really nice for everyone involved. And then what we do in our meeting culture is really try to keep it personal, have those nice conversations, ask about people, we check in on people, and we want to create an opportunity for people to be themselves and express themselves and still have fun at work.
Yeah, and it's really everybody's responsibility to really think about how they can create those moments, really connect with folks as well. You might not be talking to the VP of Human Resources every day, or you might, but you're also talking to your manager more often than not too. And we've all heard the phrase people stay or leave because of their manager as well. And I want to ask you kind of how you think about really training managers to be effective and empower their teams in this hybrid workplace too.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for those managers is to make sure that they understand the landscape that they're operating in. It's a very complicated kind of Jenga game of regulations and policies, and it's different for their hybrid people, the people that are fully remote. So for them to really understand what their obligations are as an employer and how that relationship works is important. And then to help them to continue to build those relationships and how to do the right check-ins, how are you asking about their progress? How are you really checking in on them? And how are they feeling these days? It's a stressful situation. You've been busy. How are you doing? And helping them have those conversations and showing them how to have those conversations on a regular basis, because it is harder to make that connection over a computer than it is sitting down with someone that you see every day, getting a cup of coffee, or maybe get to have lunch with more often. So helping them to understand what the employee experience is from the remote environment so that they can address on a regular basis, knowing what that person's feeling every day, because it's that disconnection that people can feel when they're working remotely. And the manager is the touchstone to the organization. So we want them to be able to share also what's going on in the organization and find opportunities for them to have interactions with some of those town halls and launch meetings that might give them more insight into what's going on with the company.
Yeah, you want to give people the tools, set people up for success, especially in these conversations, understanding the landscape and kind of what's going on with their team as well. And you mentioned earlier just having the opportunity to learn more about what other departments are doing at a company as well. I'm sure that you collaborate with literally every department at GAN. Can you give an example for folks who are listening of a project you worked on, shared goals with another department outside of HR and people, and what was the goal or end result?
Yeah, we've actually gone through a lot of those in the past few months, but most recently I had a number of projects with my finance department. We wanted to take a look at how we were doing our headcount planning, and we wanted to take a look at how we were managing outside vendors and consultants and all of those things. So it really took a lot of the different teams within the finance and accounting department and the different teams within the HR department to really figure out what we wanted to accomplish with this at the end. What was our process going to be at the end? Because the process hadn't been working as efficiently for everyone as we hoped. So we wanted to move to something that really made sense for where we are now as an organization, how quickly we have to move, where the business is, and what the business is migrating towards. So it was like a disco ball of facets. And I think working through to figure out what all those pieces were, who was going to own them, and then what the end result was, ended up with us building our processes for approvals, for clarity. People know what's happening. Managers have clarity as to what's happening with their headcounts and budgets. And it was tough, but we were all committed to getting through it. And I think that made a big difference because we saw that end goal of greater efficiency, us being on top of what we need to do, and actually it gives people time back when they're not having to go over and recheck and make sure because they're not sure the origin of the approval. So this cleared it all up for us. It was a lot of work. It took a while, but now we're happy.
I think that's a really good example too, making it more efficient, really auditing kind of day-to-day processes and giving people time back as well. When you are changing something or what we were talking about in terms of communicating what's happening within an organization in a hybrid environment, in any kind of workplace, you're bound to get feedback as well. And I know you talked a little bit about this before too, but can't be underscored enough. Kind of what does the role of the employee voice play in your HR, people, talent, and culture strategy overall?
Yeah, that the employee voice is the driver of how we're shaping the culture. We need to understand what our employees are experiencing from their end. What is it like in their remote work experience? How are they feeling about communication? Are they feeling like they're informed about things? And that's something we want to be really sensitive to, because that's, I think, a very common concern about remote workers is maybe feeling that bit of disconnection. So that voice is important to us. It is the driver. We need to balance that with the needs of the business and figure out a way for those things to coexist together. But it's also really important to check in regularly on that, because things change. It's been a crazy couple of years, and things change from one week to the next. In human resources, we all know things change 1 minute to the next. So you want to have a regular mechanism for checking in and making sure that happens, and making sure that the employees know you hear them, communicating back after surveys, holding all hands meetings so people can talk about the initiatives that come about from the surveys as well.
Exactly. Answering the question of how are you demonstrating that you're actively listening when you receive that feedback, when you hear the employee voice, and how are you having that conversation as well. Again, when changes are happening, people are bound to make mistakes, and that's okay as long as you kind of learn from them, take them forth with you. Are there any common mistakes you see companies making in their people or HR strategy just in general?
Well, what I think is important is that the leaders of an organization really truly hear their employees, and they at least make the space to hear what their employees are saying. Maybe it might not factor in the way employees hope in the outcome or the ultimate plan, but people need to feel heard. So I think making your employees feel heard, or doing the things that you need to do so that they do feel heard, is really important. And there's been a lot of things we see, changes in organizations and things happening that seem like they're happening to the organization, and that's just not a good place to be. So I think that having that opportunity to let people know you're hearing what their concerns are, and to even address maybe why you can't make all of the changes in the way that the employees are hoping for, to have that transparent conversation on top of that, I think is really important.
Absolutely. Most things you can't act on right now or tomorrow, but that doesn't mean you can't have a conversation around it. Again, going back to the why and that effective communication as well with your team and employees is really, really important. Krista, I want to open up the floor to ask if there's anything that I didn't specifically ask that you would like to share with folks who are listening, or underscoring any key takeaways from the many things we discussed around company culture.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you just mentioned, about if something's not working, we can't be afraid to say, hey, this doesn't work for us anymore in a fast-paced environment in an organization. And it's okay to question, just because we've been doing something this way, what is it the right way to continue with that process or policy? And I think that is, you have to keep that level of agility in your structure, because the organization changes, you'll have to change along with it, and it's okay. It feels disruptive sometimes. It feels like you're creating chaos, but when you make those changes to kind of keep pace with the business and the way the business is shaping, then your alignment shows. That always shows.
Being agile, being open-minded, and seeing, where can I audit the employee experience? How can I make processes more efficient, even if it's already efficient, is a good question to ask yourself as well. And I think that is a great kind of note to cap off our conversation on. Krista, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at All Voices, we really believe in both employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone.